As Ursula passed from girlhood towards womanhood, gradually the cloud of self-responsibility gathered upon her. She became aware of herself, that she was a separate entity in the midst of an unseparated obscurity, that she must go somewhere, she must become something. And she was afraid, troubled. Why, oh why must one grow up? Why must one inherit this heavy, numbing responsibility of living an undiscovered life? Out of the nothing and the undifferentiated mass to make something of herself. But what? In the obscurity and pathlessness to take a direction. But whither? How take even one step? And yet, how stand still? This was torment indeed, to inherit the responsibility of one's own life. The religion which had been another world for her, a glorious sort of play world, where she lived, climbing the tree with the short-statured man, walking shakily on the sea, like the disciple, breaking the bread into 5,000 portions, like the Lord, giving a great picnic to 5,000 people, now fell away from reality and became a tale, a myth, an illusion, which, however much one might assert it to be true, an historical fact, one knew was not true. At least for this present-day life of ours. There could, within the limits of this life we know, be no feeding of the 5,000, and the girl had come to the point where she held that that which one cannot experience in daily life is not true for oneself. So the old duality of life, wherein there had been a weekday world of people and trains and duties and reports, and besides that a Sunday world of absolute truth and living mystery, of walking upon the waters and being blinded by the face of the Lord, and watching the bush that crackled yet did not burn away, this old, unquestioned duality suddenly was found to be broken apart. The weekday world had triumphed over the Sunday world. The Sunday world was not real, or at least not actual, and one lived by action. Only the weekday world mattered. She, herself, Ursula Brangwen, must know how to take the weekday life. Her body must be a weekday body, held in the world's estimate. Her soul must have a weekday value, known according to the world's knowledge. Well then, there was a weekday life to live, of action and deeds, and so there was a necessity to choose one's action and one's deeds. One was responsible to the world for what one did. Nay, one was more than responsible to the world. One was responsible to oneself. There was some puzzling, tormenting residue of the Sunday world within her, some persistent Sunday self, which insisted upon a relationship with the now shed-away vision world. How could one keep up a relationship with that which one denied? Her task was now to learn the weekday life. How to act, that was the question. Whither to go, how to become oneself. One was not oneself, one was merely a half-stated question. How to become oneself, how to know the question and the answer of oneself, when one was merely an unfixed something, nothing, blowing about like the winds of heaven, undefined, unstated. She turned to the visions, which had spoken far-off words that ran along the blood like ripples of an unseen wind. She heard the words again. She denied the vision, for she must be a weekday person, to whom visions were not true, and she demanded only the weekday meaning of the words. There were words spoken by the vision, and words must have a weekday meaning, since words were weekday stuff. Let them speak now. Let them bespeak themselves in weekday terms. The vision should translate itself into weekday terms. "Sell all thou hast and give to the poor," she heard on Sunday morning. That was plain enough for Monday morning too. As she went down the hill to the station, going to school, she took the saying with her. "Sell all thou hast and give to the poor." Did she want to do that? Did she want to sell her pearl-backed brush and mirror, her silver candlestick, her pendant, her lovely little necklace, and go dressed in drab like the Wherrys, the lovely uncombed Wherrys, who were the poor to her? She did not. She walked this Monday morning on the verge of misery. But she did not want to do what was right, and she didn't want to do what the Gospel said. She didn't want to be poor. really poor. The thought was a horror to her. To live like the Wherrys, so ugly, to be at the mercy of everybody. Sell that thou hast, and give to the poor. One could not do it in real life. How dreary and hopeless it made her. Nor could one turn the other cheek, face. Ursula, in a mood of Christian humility, silently presented the other side of her face, which Theresa, in exasperation at the challenge, also hit. Whereupon Ursula, with boiling heart, went meekly away. But anger and deep writhing shame tortured her, so she was not easy till she had again quarrelled with Theresa, and had almost shaken her sister's head off. "That'll teach you," she said grimly. And she went away, unchristian, but clean. There was something unclean and degrading about this humble side of Christianity. Ursula suddenly revolted to the other extreme. "I hate the Wherrys, and I wish they were dead. Why does my father leave us in the lurch like this, making us be poor and insignificant? Why is he not more? If we had a father as he ought to be, he would be Earl William Brangwen, and I should be the Lady Ursula. What right have I to be poor, crawling along the lane like vermin? What right have I to be poor, crawling along the lane like vermin? If I had my rights, I should be seated on horseback in a green riding habit, and my groom would be behind me, and I should stop at the gates of the cottages, and inquire of the cottage woman who came out with a child in her arms, how did her husband, who had hurt his foot, and I would pat the flaxen head of the child, stooping from my horse, and I would give her a shilling from my purse, and order nourishing food to be sent from the hall to the cottage." So she rode in her pride, and sometimes she dashed into flames to rescue a forgotten child, or she dived into the canal locks and supported a boy who was seized with cramp, or she swept up a toddling infant from the feet of a runaway horse, always imaginatively, of course. But in the end there returned the poignant yearning from the Sunday world. As she went down in the morning from Cossitay and saw Ilkeston, smoking blue and tender upon its hill, would I have gathered thy children together as a hen gathereth her chickens under her wings, and ye would not. The passion rose in her for Christ, for the gathering under the wings of security and warmth. But how did it apply to the weekday world? What could it mean, but that Christ should clasp her to his breast as a mother clasps her child? And oh, for Christ, for him who could hold her to his breast and lose her there. Oh, for the breast of a man, where she should have refuge and bliss for ever. All her senses quivered with passionate yearning. Vaguely she knew that Christ meant something else, that in the vision world he spoke of Jerusalem, something that did not exist in the everyday world. It was not houses and factories he would hold in his bosom, nor householders, nor factory workers, nor poor people, but something that had no part in the weekday world, nor seen nor touched with weekday hand. Yet she must have it in weekday terms. She must. For all her life was a weekday life now. This was the whole. So he must gather her body to his breast, that was strong with a broad bone, and which sounded with the beating of the heart, and which was warm with the life of which she partook, the life of the running blood. So she craved for the breast of the Son of Man to lie there, and she was ashamed in her soul, ashamed. For whereas Christ spoke for the vision to answer, she answered from the weekday fact. It was a betrayal, a transference of meaning from the vision world to the matter-of-fact world. So she was ashamed of her religious ecstasy, and dreaded lest anyone should see it. Early in the year, when the lambs came and shelters were built of straw, and on her uncle's farm the men sat at night with a lantern and a dog, then again there swept over her this passionate confusion between the vision world and the weekday world. Again she felt Jesus in the countryside. Ah, he would lift up the lambs in his arms. Ah, and she was the lamb. Again, in the morning, going down the lane, she heard the ewe call, and the lambs came running, shaking and twinkling with newborn bliss, and she saw them stooping, nuzzling, groping to the udder, to find the teats, whilst the mother turned her head gravely and sniffed her own, and they were sucking, vibrating with bliss on their little long legs, their throats stretched up, their new bodies quivering to the stream of blood-warm, loving milk. Oh, and the bliss, the bliss! She could scarcely tear herself away to go to school, the little noses nuzzling at the udder, the little bodies so glad and sure, the little black legs crooked, the mother standing still, yielding herself to their quivering attraction. Then the mother walked calmly away. Jesus, the vision world, the everyday world, all mixed inextricably in a confusion of pain and bliss. It was almost agony, the confusion, the inextricability. Jesus, the vision, speaking to her who was non-visionary, and she would take his words of the Spirit and make them to pander to her own carnality. This was a shame to her. The confusing of the spirit world with the material world in her own soul degraded her. She answered the call of the Spirit in terms of the immediate, everyday desire. Come unto me, all ye that labour and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. It was the temporal answer she gave. She leapt with sensuous yearning to respond to Christ. If she could go to him really, and lay her head on his breast, to have comfort, to be made much of, caressed like a child. All the time she walked in a confused heat of religious yearning. She wanted Jesus to love her deliciously, to take her sensuous offering, to give her sensuous response. For weeks she went in a muse of enjoyment. And all the time she knew underneath that she was playing false, accepting the passion of Jesus for her own physical satisfaction. But she was in such a daze, such a tangle. How could she get free? She hated herself. She wanted to trample on herself, destroy herself. How could one become free? She hated religion because it lent itself to her confusion. She abused everything. She wanted to become hard, indifferent, brutally callous to everything but just the immediate need, the immediate satisfaction. To have a yearning towards Jesus, only that she might use him to pander to her own soft sensation, use him as a means of reacting upon herself, maddened her in the end. There was then no Jesus, no sentimentality. With all the bitter hatred of helplessness, she hated sentimentality. At this period came the young Skrebensky. She was nearly 16 years old, a slim, smouldering girl, deeply reticent, yet lapsing into unreserved expansiveness now and then, when she seemed to give away her whole soul, but when in fact she only made another counterfeit of her soul for outward presentation. She was sensitive in the extreme, always tortured, always affecting a callous indifference to screen herself. She was at this time a nuisance on the face of the earth, with her spasmodic passion and her slumberous torment. She seemed to go with all her soul in her hands, yearning to the other person. Yet all the while, deep at the bottom of her, was a childish antagonism of distrust. She thought she loved everybody and believed in everybody, but because she could not love herself, nor believe in herself, she mistrusted everybody with the mistrust of a serpent or a captured bird. Her starts of revulsion and hatred were more inevitable than her impulses of love. So she wrestled through her dark days of confusion, soulless, uncreated, unformed. One evening, as she was studying in the parlour, her head buried in her hands, she heard new voices in the kitchen speaking. At once, from its apathy, her excitable spirit started and strained to listen. It seemed to crouch, to lurk under cover, tense, glaring forth, unwilling to be seen. There were two strange men's voices, one soft and candid, veiled with soft candour, the other veiled with easy mobility, running quickly. Ursula sat quite tense,